Joining us now to try to make sense of all of this is Congressman Ted Lieu of California, physician and former Obama White House Health Policy Director, Dr. Kavita Patel, and Tim Miller, writer-at-large for The Bulwark. Dr. Patel, I have to start with you here. My mind is blown. Everybody's so excited. People keep saying it's going to be the most turnt summer ever. And yet here we are facing another potential shutdown. I mean, do you think that the country at this point will have a shutdown in October? Or will we just get used to nearly 1,000 people dying every day?
Yeah, Tiffany, you're in good company. A lot of our minds are blown, too. But I don't think we're going to get to a shutdown. I do think we're going to see continuing rolling mask mandates or mask requirements indoors. And I actually think that's the responsible thing to do. And that could hit us before October, November. This surge is something that we probably modeled out to be in the fall when people came back to school and workplaces opened fully. This is hitting us weeks earlier. And so we're going to have to deal with it probably, as you mentioned, in the modeling in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Which is insane. So, Congressman, I want to ask you, because in California, in L.A. particularly, they've already brought back the mask mandate. And you made a really good point that eventually caring for the unvaccinated will fall to the people who are vaccinated. How in the hell did saving yourself from a deadly virus become political?
That's a great question. Now, I am pleased that we now see more Republicans going public and telling people to get vaccinated. It is this amazing miracle of science that we got these amazing vaccines that are very effective at protecting you not only from the original strain, but also the Delta variant. According to a study from Public Health England, the Pfizer vaccine is 88% effective at protecting you from having any symptoms from the Delta variant. And we just need to get more people vaccinated. I'm glad that Republicans are starting to do this now. I urge more of them to come forward and tell their base to get vaccinated, because having their base get sick and potentially die is not really good for their party.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts, Congressman, but honestly, I feel like blood is on their hands. They could have done this months ago. Donald Trump could come out tomorrow and say, hey, everybody get vaccinated, and it would make a huge difference. Tim, mask mandates are coming back. We're going to see more restrictions for COVID. And if you've never known actual oppression, you can somehow mistake having to wear a mask and having to get a vaccine as such, which is completely not the case. Why the resistance? I mean, this cannot all be Trump. People do have some humane instinct that you at least want to save yourself if you don't give a damn about anybody else. Why do you think people are so resistant to saving themselves?
Okay, look, it's hard for me to get into psychoanalyze all of the reasons that folks are doing this. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. Obviously, there have been wildly irresponsible pundits and commentators on Fox and other conservative news outlets. Obviously, the Republican candidates were too late to setting a good message. This all has been, kind of really set in stone for a year now, right? If you thought COVID was a hoax last year, why would you get an experimental shot this year, right? So this goes all the way back to what was happening in the Trump administration, how he seeded this culture war. Look, I defer to the good doctor on what we're going to have to do going forward with masks and all that. I think just putting on my political hat, talking to the congressman and other Democrats, I think that Democrats should be really cautious to want to go back to mandates that vaccinated people feel like are punishing them. And I feel like the right path forward is more carrots, right? Like, look at what the NBA did today. They basically said to their players, if you're going to get vaccinated, you can do whatever you want. If you're going to be unvaccinated, you're going to have to stay in your hotel room when you come to Summer League this year, right? And I think that these types of rules in the free market, these types of nudges is a better path forward, politically speaking. Obviously, if we get to the point where you have to do mandates and nudges, that's where you are. But I just think that the Democrats should look to that first and think, we're the responsible party. We're trying to encourage people to be responsible. We're not punishing people who are being responsible.
I hear you, Tim, but let me just say, I don't look at it as punishment. I'm vaccinated, and I know enough people who have been impacted by this virus post-vaccination. It's still saving ourselves, right? So, Dr. Patel, I'll ask you, how long? I feel like it's only a matter of time before one of these variants could potentially penetrate these vaccines in a fatal way. We haven't seen that right now, but the virus is getting smarter. So is that something that the medical community is considering, and is that something we should all be concerned about as increasingly people are not getting vaccinated?
We should. And to be candid, Tiffany, I agree with the projections that optimistically, vaccinations are going up, by the way, about 600,000 in the last 24 hours. But we will probably peak out at 70-75%. And so to your point, we already have variants after the Greek letter Delta, Lambda, and that originated from Peru, which has even more concerning mutations. And there is absolutely going to be potentially all the way to Pi and others. So those variants and their mere existence, Tiffany, pose what we really worry about, which is immune escape. We do not have it. Congressman Lieu is right. Our current vaccines work against our known variants. But, Tiffany, if there's something the virus has taught me and my colleagues, this is so much a land of the unknown. Just when we think we understand it, the virus is smart enough, point mutations, to throw a kind of an entire boomerang into the equation. So the only way to mitigate this, vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. But if you can't get to that level, we are going to have to talk about mitigation things like masks again, especially as kids are going back to school, which I insist they do.
Yeah, I mean, people who are uncomfortable with masks, I guarantee you a ventilator is a lot more uncomfortable. Congressman, Tennessee, I have to say, I feel like the virus isn't actually the thing that's killing us, it's ignorance. And in Tennessee, they have finally started re-engaging with vaccination outreach efforts after some backlash. And you tweeted about this. I mean, how do we combat ignorance? You know, there's kind of a war on science, a war on the medical community. Republicans on Capitol Hill, like Dr. Rand Paul, would rather make Dr. Fauci the enemy instead of trying to figure out how to save American people. How do we penetrate that willful layer of ignorance of people who are saying, well, I'm just not going to do it because I don't want to?
Of the remaining people who are not vaccinated, there's basically three groups. There are folks that can't be vaccinated because they're either too young or they're immunocompromised or have some other condition where they can't be. Then you have a group of people who are just ideologically resistant. But you have this other group that's still pretty big that are vaccine hesitant. And for those folks, the best way is to get doctors to talk to them and medical professionals. And if you get them facts, many of them will come around and get vaccinated. So I think there is hope to get a lot more people vaccinated as we head into the fall.
And I hope you're right, but I do also think about people all over this globe, Dr. Patel, who are dying, literally dying for the vaccine. And they're watching what's happening here in America as privileged Americans scoff at it. They dismiss it. And you see footage of people who are literally on their deathbeds, just hoping and wishing they can get this vaccine. How do we look to the global community as we sit here in our comfortable spaces and we just thumb our nose at something that's life-saving? I mean, and how can America really be helpful to other people in the world if we're wasting these vaccines on people who don't want them?
Yeah, you're right. We talk about the two Americas. We're living in two worlds. This is the world of the kind of top wealthiest countries that have essentially hoarded the vaccines, and basically 85% of the earth. And that's what we need to take into consideration. Look, I think the Biden administration has been doing a lot. They can do more by urging other countries to kind of pour into the efforts globally, money, Pfizer, vaccines, contracts, Novavax, any of these manufacturers that are outside the U.S. But at some point, you're right, Tiffany, I've been throwing doses away. I know that nobody wants to talk about this. They expire. They sit on our shelves. I throw them away. Do you know how many lives I could save with even what's left in a precious vial? And I think that's what we're going to have to try to figure out how to communicate. And we're watching this play out globally. But, Tiffany, we've been watching it for a year, and it doesn't feel like people care. And I agree with the congressman. They're hesitant people. But there are people who absolutely think that the government is behind this and that there's magnets in the vaccine and that Bill Gates will monitor us. I mean, it's disturbing how many Democrats also share some of those beliefs. So we have a lot of work to do, Tiffany. This is unfortunately not going to be the end. Vaccines are the light at the tunnel. It's a long tunnel.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the scary part. This ignorance is not bipartisan. I've had plenty of conversations with people who are these conspiracy theorists, prison yard philosophizing about what this vaccine allegedly does to you, when you can literally Google, read a reputable outlet and find out what it does. Tim, last word to you, because Sean Hannity came out and, made this big fuss like, oh, please get vaccinated. And then he walked back his words. This is why I'm hesitant to give Republicans an attaboy and a pat on the back after they sat on their hands for almost a year and let hundreds of thousands of people die to follow their MAGA madman. For people who solely focused on Fox News and conservative contributors. What's your advice to those folks who trust these voices and are willing to risk their lives for it?
Yeah, look, two things. One, really quick, Tiffany. We do have to give credit, actually, to the Biden administration that has been sharing vaccines with the globe. They may have been a little slow to that, but that is one good thing that they deserve credit for. As far as this Hannity and these folks are concerned, look, as I said, you don't get a year of misinformation, a year of calling it a hoax, a year of believing every conspiracy, and then you get put out one statement where you're like, hey, I think people should get vaccinated, and all of that year of misinformation goes away. Right. I mean, there needs to be a much more concerted effort. And for Republicans who do care about the lives of their constituents, which is a handful of Republicans, maybe not as many as we'd hoped, there needs to be a much more proactive effort, creative thinking. If Trump's going to go do rallies, why not do rallies with vaccines? Right. I mean, that needs to be the message to them. Just one statement to the press is not getting the job done. There needs to be a much more creative thinking about how they can get into these communities. Making them get a jab to go to an SEC football game might be a good start in the fall, or things of that nature, because just one quote isn't doing the deal.
Yeah, well, we'll be talking about the NFL mandate later in the show, so stay tuned for that. And just if you're on the other side of the divide in this political debate, just remember the only people who align with you are in the MAGA crowd, so you may want to rethink your whole philosophy around that. But thank you so much, Congressman Ted Lieu, Dr. Kavita Patel, and Tim Miller.